Hi there, I'm Amanda Castor with Material Girl Quilts, and today I'm here to share a new quilt pattern that is fat quarter friendly, and it's called the Prairie Quilt. It's, as you can see behind me, a great size. It finishes at 72 inches square, and it's based off of what my Encyclopedia of Quilt Blocks calls the Illinois state block. Now, when I researched, I found out the state of Illinois is also called the Prairie State, so that's where I came up with the quilt name. One of the reasons I love this block is because it uses two of my favorite quilt features, is half square triangles and flying geese, and so when I put them together with this fabric, I just thought it was a beautiful pattern. And another great thing about this quilt is that the blocks finish at 18 inches square, so the larger the blocks, the quicker it is to get done. So without further ado, let's get to it. For each block, you will need to cut two 7 1/4 inch squares of your print fabric from your fat quarters, as well as two 7-inch squares from your fat quarters. And then from the background fabric, you will need to cut two 7-inch squares, one 6 1/2 inch squares, and 8 3 7/8 inch squares. So the first thing that we're going to do to piece this block is we're going to make the half square triangles that are in the corner of the block. So to do that, let's set these aside. We are going to place right sides together the 7-inch print square and the 7-inch background square. We'll place them right sides together, draw a line along one diagonal as I've done here, and then you will sew 1/4 inch on either side of that line. And once you've done that, you will then cut directly on your drawn line and press these open towards the print fabric, and you will repeat this process to create a total of 4 half square triangles for the corners of your blocks. Now the next step for this block is creating the flying geese, and how we're going to do that is using the no waste method for making flying geese. So we will start with the 7 1/4 inch square of your print fabric, and then you will take two of your 3 7/8 inch background squares and lay them right sides together on opposite corners, like so, and then you will draw a line on the diagonal across those squares like we've done here. And then you will sew 1/4 inch on either side of the drawn line. And I've done that here, and so once you're done sewing that, you will then cut again directly on your drawn line. And then at this point, you will press these open towards the background fabric. And once those are pressed, so again, you'll have two squares to do this from, so you'll do this twice. But once those are pressed open, then you'll take another background square, place it right sides together, draw on this diagonal line here, and you'll sew 1/4 inch on either side of that line. And I'll go do that now. Now that we've sewn 1/4 inch on either side of this line here, we will again cut directly on the drawn line and then press again towards the background fabric, and that will give you your flying geese. So for each 7 1/4 inch square that we start with, you will end up with 4 flying geese. So you'll need to make 8 flying geese total. And when you're done, you need to trim these or square them up if necessary to measure 3 1/2 inches by 6 1/2 inches. And for me, that usually just involves trimming off these little dog ears. So once you have those trimmed, you're going to sew these into pairs, as I've done here for this pair. So you'll have 4 different pairs of flying geese sewn together. And then we will lay out the quilt block. So for the quilt block, we will start with the 6 1/2 inch background square in the center. And I may have neglected to say this, but your half square triangles that you pieced, you need to trim those to be 6.5 inches square. And those will be on the outside corners of your block. And then the remaining 4 spots will be where your pairs of flying geese go. And they will be pointing out towards the outside of the block. So I don't have these all sewn together yet, but this will give you an idea. So again, we'll trim up the flying geese to be 3.5 inches by 6.5 inches, and then sew those into pairs. And the half square triangles will be 6.5 inch squares. Then we will sew these into 3 different rows, and then sew the 3 rows together to complete the block. As a reminder, a printable PDF of the quilt pattern is in the video description below, and all of the materials that I used to make this quilt, there are links in that video description as well. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you make this quilt, I would love to see it. Please tag me on social media at Material Girl Quilts and use the hashtag Prairie Quilt. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.